take us through, you know, a young Gord? You know, you taught the whole band in high school. Maybe we can start there. You know, what's your first earliest memories of Gord Downie?
Well, I first met Gord through Paul. I don't think I taught him the first semester he was there that I remember, but he was very quiet, shy kind of kid, athletic though, but he didn't play football for me. He played basketball, and he played 2 or 3 other sports.
Did you try to get him to play football?
I don't recall that I tried. I know I tried the other 2, but and Paul played football for me, but not till grade 13.
When we look when we look back at the boys as a group, you taught every single one of them. Is that correct? What was it like in your house when Gord would come over to hang out with your son Paul?
It was quiet. If grade 11 or 12 boys can be quiet, but yeah, it was. Gord was not a noisemaker or a troublemaker. He was quiet, thoughtful. He had a big smile. He polite. It was a low key, unlike his personality on stage.
Quite different.
Yes.
When the boys left high school, that's kind of when they kind of got the band together, to your recollection.
Yeah. And they, as I said before, I don't recall exactly the evolution of the band, but I know there was an older guy who played saxophone was with them just before Paul joined, and he left and went back to Toronto, and they asked Paul to join them, and I think at the time they were living in Gord's father's house that he had on Johnson Street across from Victoria Park, and Paul lived with them there, and that's where they started. And they'd play at the Manor too, you know, the pub, the popular pub.
You're a high school teacher. Your son Paul Langlois is now in this band with his buddy Gord, and did you ever think it was gonna end up like this, the Tragically Hip, our nation's band?
No, and they didn't really either when you think of it. 4 of them went to university. They were preparing for other things, but they really stuck to it. They drove across Canada in the winter time at least 4 or 5 times, across the country and back. Yeah, it was amazing the effort they put into it, and playing everywhere, and playing for anybody. They tell me there were nights in the pubs where there would be hardly anybody there, 2 or 3 people, and they'd play the whole thing.
You're a father. I'm a new father. I'd imagine, you know, when you think about your kids, you kind of want them to aspire for different things. You know what I mean? Maybe, you know, some parents want their kids to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. You're a high school teacher. You're a professional yourself. Your son gets into the music industry. What's your thoughts there? Were you worried? Were you concerned?
Well, yeah, you better keep going to school, or you don't know what's going to happen, and you can't count on a musical career where you do well. So, yeah, and I think all the parents of the members of the HIP told them, you know, keep going to school and work, and they got jobs. Like Paul had a job starting at after the paper route. He went and cleaned up at the curling club at nights and that kind of thing. So they all had jobs, and they all, you know, pretty well lived a normal life, except playing in a band.
When you think back to Gord, the young boy in your phys ed class, the friend of your son's who he'd bring over to the house maybe for dinner, and then the man he became. You know, proud. What are your thoughts when you think of
well, just like if you knew Gord outside the band and off the stage, he was pretty well the same kid I first met in grade 11, but he was a different personality on stage, and I never saw the poet in him until he started writing songs and writing about Canada. And so to me there were two Gords. Gord, public Gord, and private Gord.
And private Gord to you was a quiet young man when you first met him, generous.
Yeah, very nice kid, very nice person.
When you saw him in the last couple of years, what was going through your mind as you saw him battle with this horrible disease?
I thought this is not fair. It's too young. It's tragic. They're not finished. All the normal thoughts that go through your mind, you know, and it happened right after his father died, and it was pretty tragic, and he fought a good fight, lasted 2 years nearly, so, but can't do much about brain cancer.
Have you talked to Paul today? Have you talked to your son today?
No. When I came off the course at 11, I called them, and they told me he'd already left for Toronto.
You know your son well, you know the band well, you know Johnny, you know Gord. Where do you think their heads are at today as they go through this?
They're going to be heavily saddened and with a heavy weight on their shoulders for a while. And it's going to be hard for them to face all the publicity. And then they weren't given the Order of Canada. They're supposed to go next month. So they're not going to be too joyous for that.
It's a tough time.
Yeah.
This community here, where the boys grew up, where you still live, what is the band? What is your son? What is Gord Downie? What is Johnny Fay? What is Gord Sinclair? What have these guys meant to this city?
It's difficult for me to judge that, but I gather that most people have adopted them, especially since their last tour. It was unbelievable that the feeling and the turnout and what I saw people behave like, and we thought that there would be problems downtown, and when the show was on, it was none. And it's like everybody fell in love with them, and now they've adopted them. And I think that everybody in Kingston and in Canada would be sad today, or are sad.
Your son was supposed to play a show nearby in Gananoque next weekend, I believe, or this coming weekend rather. Where does his musical career go?
Where does what?
Where does his music go from here? You know, where does the band's music go from here?
I don't know. I noticed that Rob and Gord are playing with Miss Emily, and Paul's playing in this group, Liars Club, and I don't know if Johnny's in any group, but
the music will go on.
They're still going to do music, but I don't think their heart will be in it like it was for the hip.
If you were to, for our viewers, you know, in closing, you know, if you were to look back at young Gord, knowing what was ahead of him in life, if you were able to foreshadow his future for him, what would you say to him?
I would, I basically say what I say to my students as they leave, is good luck and do your best.
If you had a moment to say something to him today, what would you say?
You were great. You did it. You finished your job, and everybody admires you for it.